Yes, now I would like to welcome Rajeeb Sah. He is the he is the senior lecturer in the public health program and is the program director for the master programs of global public health in Canterbury Christ Church University. He is also an international lead for School of Allied and Public Health Professions and also a fellow of Higher Education Academy. He is interested in international and intercultural aspects of health and education, inclusive curriculum, sustainability in education, and student-staff partnership in higher education. In his presentation today, he will be talking about staff-student partnership in learning and teaching, which is a very important element we need to consider as practitioners. The title of his presentation is Students as Partners in Learning and Teaching, Assessing the Effectiveness of Students' Evaluation of Teaching. I consider it's a great honor to welcome Dr. Sah to our presentation. Hello, Dr. Sah. How are you?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. So can I start now?
Sorry?
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, you can start. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your welcome introduction. I would like to thank the organizer, the English Language Center, University of Bahrain, for giving me this opportunity to share my research and findings through this web conference. And thank you very much for this lovely introduction. I think many people here will be wondering what this guy from health or public health is doing here at the educational conference. I mean, I just want to say one thing. I teach. I am a teacher. I teach in a higher education in the United Kingdom, not an English language, but in English language, and where there are many students within my class whose English is not a first language. I mean, you can realize even from my English that English is not my first language. And the reason I'm saying this is like, this brings in a lot of challenges in terms of like how we deal with the students and how we talk with the students. And this is important because that fits into the context of students and as partners in learning. Because if they are coming from the diverse nature of the students, then it is very important to make sure that they can raise their voice within their teaching and learning, so that they can expect what they are expecting from the program or from the learning. And that is very important part of it. In this context, today I am going to talk about students as partners in learning in the context of student evaluation of teaching. I'm sure many of you will be aware. Sorry, I'm trying to change the slides. Yeah, I'm sure many of you will be aware that student evaluation of teaching is very normal process for many of the higher education in the United Kingdom, and that is the same around the world, I believe. One thing I need to highlight about this study is that this is my study at Canterbury Christ Church University, where I teach various modules on the public health program. And the selection of this topic was based on my reflections when I used to use a student evaluation of teaching for my programs. And it used to make me happy and sad at the same time. Happy because I was a new lecturer and I always liked to take reflections from the students, or critical overview from the students that can help me to sort of like improve my teaching. And that's the reason I was quite happy about this process, but sad because many of the students will be very much not interested in completing this. And that raised quite a lot of questions about like why they are not really interested in completing these sorts of like a critical overview where they can give their own voices. And that's where I started to sort of like have informal discussions with my students, where I used to teach. And the most common answers I used to get within those conversations was that the set was the student evaluation of teaching form, which we used to do which we used to use for our program was quite long and confusing. Another point they used to always highlight was about that they could not relate to the questions that was in the student evaluation of teaching. Another key point they used to always highlight was like how will we benefit from this evaluation, and is it going to make any difference or not? And that is where I decided I think I need to explore this further. And then I did that as part of my postgraduate certificate in academic practice, which was required for me to complete in order to get the Fellow of Higher Education Academic. And I was very pleased to do this. I was very pleased to sort of like take this opportunity to complete this work. It is also one of the sort of like student evaluation of teaching. As I said earlier, it is one of the major ways where UK higher education sort of like try to gauge about the level of sort of like teaching within the modules. It is also one of the key way in which a student can partners as a teaching in learning. Of course, there are many other ways where a student can partner in teaching and learning, but this is one of the way where they can really raise the voice in the day-to-day content, in the learning resources for that particular module. And so I thought like this was a way forward, and this was quite good opportunity for me to sort of like take this opportunity to do this project. So what I decided was the aim for this study was to make sure I strengthen the students' partnership in teaching and learning using this student evaluation of teaching for that particular module or 4 modules. And I wanted to achieve this through engaging with students and lecturer to understand what are they expecting. What are they expecting from this student evaluation of teaching? The second point I wanted to do was to review the existing or the original student evaluation of teaching form, and then to develop a revised questionnaire to reflect what the students and the staff were sort of like saying about how that can integrate their voices within this revised questionnaire. The third point I wanted to do was like to assess the effectiveness of both the new and the old student evaluation of form to see whether there is any evidence if we try to integrate their voices into the form or not, especially in terms of like whether the completion rate of this student evaluation of teaching, where previously a student was not willing to complete, that improves or not, and what they thought about this new revised questionnaire. And that was the key aims and objectives for this research project. Now, the best way to do this was to use an action research approach to conduct this project. And the purpose of this action research was to learn through the actions leading to the development of the revised set of questionnaires, and that can be used for the sort of like assessment again. I took an inspiration from the Chemis and McTaggart's action research spiral, where my previous reflections or previous observations acted as a critical reflective tool to plan for the new revised, sort of like revised questionnaire. So I used that reflections from my previous modules to develop a new revised questionnaires and take that planning a stage further. And then what I did was like I implemented or I used those questionnaires to give it to the students on the modules which I taught, and it was the students from Year 1 and Year 3 on the BSc Public Health or Health Studies program. And those were the modules I was teaching. Of course, I received the ethical approval for that from the University Ethics Panel, and then I was able to conduct that research. The selection of first and final year students was quite important for me because the first year students were mostly very enthusiastic about sharing what they think about their teaching and learning, the teaching and learning process. And that's the reason they were very important part of it. The final year students looked very disappointed in a way. And the reason for that being they had completed so many of those student evaluation form that they were not sort of like thinking of what this new form will do to them. And it may be sort of like maybe another exercise that might not be useful for them. So they were very much sort of like disappointed in a way. I think this was also important because the first year students was this was the first questionnaire what the first year students were completing, and so the enthusiasm was much more there. But for the final year student was like, okay, this is my last module, so who cares? So that sort of attitude. So there was the dynamics to that one. I used the accent research for the purpose of this because I think this gave me a good platform in terms of like where I could compare the previous one and the new organized questionnaire. And before I move on to talk a little bit more about my findings, I think I will show you what those questionnaires were. So if you see this diagram here, or this, I don't know, table here, the first two is the original questionnaire. So you can see that I had, when I was using the original questionnaire, it has 7 different categories, and it used sort of like 2 to 5 questions in each categories. And that means there was a total of about 17 questions that they had to use the Likert scale to show their view about those questionnaire. And then there were 6 other categories on the other side of the page. And there it was the open questions, not even the questions, where they had to basically write about what was their achievement of aims, module content, teaching and learning, learning resources, and assessment, and all those other things they had to write about. Now, this was quite daunting because this was quite a big work to ask for the students to complete. So what I did was like, I developed a 1-page questionnaire, which included approximately very similar number of questions, but it was more concise and based on what they really wanted to say. The students really wanted to talk about. And this was very important for me because it reflected the voices of the students within these new questions. And I included 15 questions for that. And then I included three sorts of like open-ended questions. And this was also important because open-ended questions is important where they can write about anything. But it needs to be really, really open, because if it is not really open, that means like they will be restricted in what they want to write. So I took that approach and took that view in terms of like in terms of organizing these questions. And then the next step was to implement these questions to see whether these were sort of like much better or not. Now, of course, many people will ask that, okay, the first question was standard and it is very much similar to the second one. What changes I was making? And will it make any difference? I don't know. And I don't know if the revised one is very perfect sort of like set of questionnaire or not. But that is the point of action research, and that is what sort of like the chemist and McTaggart's action research spiral says. You need to plan something and see if it works or not, and then get the learning from there to again reflect on that to create a new plan, and then test it again. So it is a spiral, and we try to do and improve as much as I can. And that is the approach I took for this particular project. Now, I don't know if these findings will sort of like show any differences or not, but this is what I found. So before I talk about finding, I need to say this. So what I did was like the original questionnaire, I gave it at the start of the session. And I did not sort of like put it as a part of the lesson plan. So it was very random, and I said like, okay, can you please complete this questionnaire for your module evaluation? Whereas The revised questionnaire, what I did was like, I slotted it within the lesson plan, and I allocated 15 minutes of the lesson plan for the completion of that revised questionnaire. And this is very important point to remember. And then when at the start, when I gave the original questionnaire, the response rate was, as you can see on the right-hand side, for Air 1 students, 80% of students completed those questionnaire. And as you have seen that there was Likert scale question and there were the short questions on the other side of the paper. Only 5 students out of those 12 students completed those short questions. So basically the data which we are getting from the short questions or the open questions was very, very limited. On the third year student, you see here, 89% of those completed the Likert scale type question, and only 25% of those 16 students completed the open-ended questions, and which for me was not that great, but this was in line with what I was sort of like receiving from the previous years of my experience. Now, when towards the end of the session, when there was a slotted sort of like 15 minutes a session within the lesson plan, when I gave my revised questionnaire to those students, the first year students, the same group of students, all 15 students completed the Likert scale question, which was quite good, to be honest. And the short question, 10 students, although there was just 3 short questions or 3 open-ended questions, only 10 students completed that, and that was 66% of those who has completed. Now, this is quite interesting because although this is not quite significant change, but that is much more higher than 41%, which I had received previously for the original questionnaire. Now, for the Air 3 students, 17 students out of 18 completed the questionnaire. So one student, she decided not to complete. And of course, I mean, it was their own decision. I couldn't do anything about that. And out of that 17 students, 53%, that is 9 participants, they completed even the open question. So they were more eager to write their open answers, which was quite good because that was 23, that was sort of like much higher or double than what I had received for the original questionnaire, which was 89% and 25%. So although not the significant differences, but it looked like these revised questions were working, and the time sort of like allocated timeline within their lesson plan, I think that worked to some extent. And at the bottom of the screen, there is the total sort of like aggregated for the Air 1 and Air 3. 97% of the students completed compared to 84% for the original questionnaire, and 59% or about 60% have completed the open questionnaire compared to 32%. So again, even on the aggregate scale, we see that there was slight improvement in terms of like how it was getting. Now, how we can get 100%, that will be possibly the research for the next spiral when I get into reflect on these findings and then get into another source of like a revised questionnaire. But then what was the reason why, so what did the people think about the original questionnaire and why they were not completing? And I was just trying to have sort of like general conversation with the student, and what they said was these key points. And what most of the participants talked was about this is about the original questionnaire. It's about, oh, this is not very clear and we get confused what is being asked. Is the same on the both sides. And this was about the original, and that was coming even in the pre-discussions what I did before deriving the question. So that was repeated again and again. Another point that was made by many of the participants within that research was, it is too long, there are so many questions and too many answers to write about. We do not feel writing about the same thing again and again because we have already ticked the boxes. And that was another comment from them. There was another comment, and that was about completing this form is not going to change anything for us. So that was also like that disbelief that there is going to be any changes as a result of completing those questionnaire. And this may be because it was as a result, these questions were preset and they were not involved as a part of the sort of like development of these questionnaire. And that may be the reason their thinking was like that. I don't know, that may be one of the assumptions I can make. Another participant says there are different expectations from different lecturers, and if we like the lecturers, we may complete and tick all the boxes, but most of the time we just complete it randomly. I mean, many of you will be guilty of doing that ourselves, I believe. When we get any survey, then we just tick the box rather than read carefully. And the students are not different from that. And if they like the lecturer, it's very much on, oh, we like this lecturer, and so we need to complete this sort of like survey, and that is how they look at it. But I think that should not be the case. They need to be knowing what the expectation is and other thing, and that is very important part of it. And then there were other comments like that. Now, the same questions I asked for the revised questionnaire, and I thought like, okay, let me see what they have to say. And the response was much more positive, because this is much better and short, just one page. And can you see there the psychology here we are playing with? We had, again, even for the revised one, there was also like 15 Likert scale questions, but it all fitted within the one page. They were having 17 Likert scale questions for the original, but that was too much for them. Possibly the too much was the open question, and in the revised one, I had only 3 and that worked for them. So it was the sort of like psychology they were thinking. If it is 2 pages, it is quite a lot to complete. If it is just 1 page, then maybe it is very straightforward. And this is the psychology we have to play with the students. Otherwise, they might not be very interested. But their feedback for the revised one was, this is really good, but still, we don't think this will be taken seriously. So again, there is a point where they were in disbelief, saying that, okay, will that make any difference? And we as a lecturer need to tackle that. Having the time slot, another participant said, having the time slot is very good. This means we can complete this, but then it would be further prefer we are talking about it. So they liked more to have that informal discussion rather than completing this form. And they were talking about discussing about any issues, possibly midway through the module, would be much better, and it gives the opportunity to address any issues raised. And I personally believe, I mean, this works much better. And rather than having just sort of like the module evaluation at the end, I think it's better to have informal discussion after every session and see if students are willing to engage in those discussions, to have prefer any form of changes that is required to improve the learning of those students within that module or not. That works much better. The second point is it also makes them feel engaged and makes them feel that they are partners in that teaching and learning. And it gives the onus on the students, which is very, very important if we really want to make them as a partners of learning. And that is a strong sense I was getting. Another student says like, oh, if we can get any benefit in terms of like print credits on our ID card, that will work as a sort of like a positive point for us to get more engaged. But I know that that is not going to be possible for every module, because I mean, on each program, we run several modules. And if we start providing credits for all those modules, that was not going to be economically feasible for the faculty, for the school. So although that is a good point, but yeah, it's not always good. Possibly we might have to look at other ways of making that happen. Also, another point they highlighted was, this is good, but we need to know how this is going to benefit us from the learning experiences. And I think that 360-degree feedback was coming again and again from the students. And what students wanted was some form of mechanism that something is being done about this evaluation. Now, you might be sort of like scratching your head and thinking, oh, were we not doing anything about it? No. We were doing something about it. And we had the sort of like process where after module evaluation, we'll compile the action point and what actions we'll be taking to improve the experience of the student. And we'll share that with the students on the virtual learning environment. But no students will be aware of that. Maybe students are not informed of that. Maybe we were not sharing those findings in the classroom through that, I don't know, allocated session or something like that. And that was the problem. They were not aware. They were not informed about that. And that was the problem. What they wanted is about information about how this process works, how these are being used. the 360-degree feedback, starting from the evaluation, coming back to how we act on that. And that is quite important for all those students. And we understood quite significantly that this was required. Now, on that note, what I concluded on the base of the reflection from this project was that SET is an important exercise. So yes, student evaluation of teaching needs to be done. It is an important exercise for the lecturers as well as for the students. And it has the potential to improve the learning environment and ensure or sort of like said that students are partners in learning. But the purpose of the expectations of why we are doing a student evaluation of teaching, I think that is most important, and that needs to be explained to the student. And if we can do that, then possibly it can be much more effective. It can be much more well received rather than just leaving it till the last minute. The second point I've highlighted, and that's the learning for me, is like SET questionnaire need to be short, simple, and accessible. If it is long, lengthy, tedious, then basically it sort of like it is not interesting for students to complete it, even if it is beneficial for them, or if it is beneficial for the lecturer itself. So it is important to make sure that it is reflecting the core components, and then it can be acted upon quickly rather than just collecting the information. And there is no sort of like a standard version, but the key is like we need to come up with something which is more simple and more accessible in the way that if you are just giving it at some point within the lecture, that might not work, and if it is allocated time, it may work quite nicely. Now, sometimes a student will be not in class, they will be rushing, and that's where I think these days the virtual learning environment can be used as a platform. We use Blackboard for our teaching purposes, and that can be used in a way to integrate that student evaluation of teaching, and that may work better. But again, I mean, many of you will be thinking, oh, many university already does that, and I'm sure you might have seen the research around sometimes it is effective and sometimes the response rate is quite low. So there needs to be a way to mitigate how it is not about just putting there, integrating within the Blackboard, but making sure how the information is being sent to the students so they are responding to those evaluations, and that can be a very important part of the discussion. I thought open-ended questions were important to give the students to opportunity to answer whatever they like, rather than sort of like confining their answers or limiting their answers to the Likert scale like questions. But I think this needs to be very, very balanced, and it needs to be really open so that they can just talk or they can write about anything they want. And the key should be about whoever is reviewing those to understand the feedback and put it into the themes that can be worked together to improve the teaching and learning on that particular modules. Regular informal conversation, as I said earlier, that worked much better, and what does that do is like you don't need to wait for the implementation till end. It means like you can implement every week as it goes, and if it is sort of like something which can be done very, very quickly, then I think it is quite beneficial for the lecturers and for the students, because that means like they see the changes and it improves the engagement within the classroom. And I think that is the best way to go forward. Of course, do the evaluation at the end of the module or at the midpoint of the module, but also I think regular conversation, informal or formal conversation, is quite important in a way to get the insights from the student. And the last one, as I said, I've said many times within this presentation, was 360-degree feedback. I think any one of us, I mean, we all as scholars have or as lecturers have gone through that our appraisal process, and we all get crossed when we don't get the feedback of what we have been taught within the appraisal process and how that works. Same for students. It is same for students, exactly. So they need to know what is the process and how we close that loop if they understand that, whatever they are writing, whatever feedback they are providing is being acted upon and is being looked after, then I believe like students will be much more engaged and much more sort of like eager to complete the student evaluation of teaching, much more responsible to feel that they are really part of a student, a part of the teaching and learning, and that is what we need to achieve. That's all from me, and thank you very much. I'll be quite happy to take some of the questions if anyone has got. And that's my email address. If anyone wants to talk more about this, I'll be quite happy to discuss that further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajeeb. This was a really inspirational one. I really liked the results that you shared with us. And I would like to ask something, actually, I found really interesting. This was about the feedback you got from the third-year students. You said, or she, completing this form is not going to change anything for us now. We have filled in so many questionnaires and we don't know what is being done about it. Mm-hmm. Now, upon this, I felt like, you know, would it be a good idea to include students in the curriculum design? What would you say?
Yes, definitely, and that is the way forward. And I think the comment was made by third-year students because they had made quite a lot of sort of like they had fed quite a lot of questionnaire from their previous modules. And I think, I mean, that is where we are moving. So a student evaluation of teaching is one aspect where we can include them as a student or partner in learning for that particular module. But of course, it needs to be integrated from the source of like major scale, where is the curriculum development. I think, I mean, it will be very wrong to think in this 21st century that any curriculum development can be completed without the input of the student, because they are the partner in learning and we need to include them. But what I'm trying to say here is like, we should not just say that, okay, now you have completed the curriculum development, you have taken part in that, and that's it, your role is just stop there. No, they need to be part of day-to-day discussion. They need to be part of any improvement we are taking forward after that curriculum development, and that is very important for them.
Thank you so much. There is one question here. Students' evaluation of teaching is an administrative tool to outcut the non-conforming teachers to size rather than offering the teachers valuable input towards increasing the efficiency of teaching.
That's very interesting question, Dr. Thamin, you have asked. I mean, it's quite interesting that you are asking this question, and I have asked myself these questions a lot of times, many times. The reason being, yes, at many places, it is an administrative tool. And if it is so, the student needs to be informed about it. And that is the key point, what I was trying to highlight. If they are not informed about it, and that is where the gaps are. But in many institutions, especially in the UK higher education, it is used for the improvement. And that is where I'm trying to sort of like lobby in that it should be used for the improvement of the teaching and learning rather than the administrative tool. Also, second point in relation to that will be, that's the reason I was highlighting the informal conversation, which happens every week. For me, that is much more important, because that is what will make more impact on the day-to-day basis, and they will see, the students will see as partners in developing the curriculum on the day-to-day basis, rather than just waiting for the end of the module, where we possibly might get something, and in some university, it will be just used for the board of examiner purposes. In some university, it will be just used, as you have rightly highlighted, for the efficiency purposes. No, we need to make sure it is involved, it is engaged, and the conversation is itself every time. One thing what I have not included in my presentation is like, what was the expectations from the faculty? And that was another aspect what I had explored. my research. And what faculty faculty members said, all of them was like, oh no, we are doing this to improve the student experience. And I was like, yes, if we are doing this to improve the student experience, then we need to make sure exactly what Dr. Tamim has said, this is not happening. This is not happening as a cost-cutting corners, or this is not happening for the reducing of the group size or increasing the group size. And we need to be very clear about that, and we need to be firm about that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sah. It was lovely to have you here with us today. Now, could I please ask you to fill in the poll that will appear on the screen, and we will continue with our presentation soon.